Party, it was originally called the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense, and they were started in Oakland, California in 1966 by Huey Newton and Bobby Seale. And they were, in a little over a year, they had spread to 35 major cities in the United States, and including 5 chapters in New Jersey itself. And the group's rhetoric, they were very militant. They hated the police, and their stance was one of armed self-defense, and they were really looking to protect the black community from perceived racism, especially police brutality. So, and they were very controversial for this stance, and many members were imprisoned and killed, as well as they killed people too. But their original vision was one of having like a self-contained community where they would do free breakfast for children and education, drug rehabilitation, sickle cell anemia testing. And so this is the original 6 founders, and Huey Newton and Bobby Seale in the middle there. Now, the 2 years that the Black Panthers were here in Jersey City sort of mirrored what was happening on the national level. So it's a good little case study. But before we get to them, we have to step back a little bit and get some historical perspective on where they came from. Now, the civil rights movement really took off right after World War II. A lot of people were, at that time, there was an integration of African Americans into the military, and they came back feeling, you know, we just sacrificed a whole lot, and we're not going to put up with what's happening here, especially in the South. And people like Bayard Rustin on the left, Martin Luther King Jr. on the right, and helped form and motivate groups like CORE, the Congress of Racial Equality, and SNCC, which is the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, and which formed in the South mainly to challenge segregationist laws, where people weren't, African Americans were not allowed to, participate in the, schools were separate, public facilities were separate, and they worked to sort of dismantle the legal system that was surrounding that. And, so here in Jersey City, there was a very active group, chapter of CORE, the Congress of Racial Equality, and they were, starting in the early 60s, really pushing the envelope here in Jersey City. And one of the key people was Reverend Robert Kest, who was the Reverend at St. John's Episcopal Church, which is right down here on Summit Avenue. I get a picture of that. Which is an amazing church, which is falling into ruin, by the way. Now, Reverend Castle was born and raised in Jersey City. In 1962, he was named as one of the top 10 outstanding young men by the JCs, which was a national organization. And he was an outspoken champion of civil rights. He's still alive and still fighting civil rights issues, but up in Harlem. And in July of 1963, one of the things that CORE did was held protest demonstrations against the trust company, and they wanted them to start hiring African Americans. And this went before arbitration, and they agreed, they caved. A week later, they were at it again, and Robert Castle and 9 other people came and sort of took over the White Castle Diner in North Bergen and were arrested for disorderly conduct, and that was their nonviolent demonstration. They wanted White Castle to hire African Americans.
I'm not
now,
mixing White Castle anymore.
Yeah. And so now a little bit, that was in 1963, so all this stuff was stirring. 1964, Lyndon B. Johnson, in the State of the Union address, declared a war on poverty here in the United States. The unemployment rate was or the poverty rate was about 19% in the country. Really, really bad times. And his call led to the enactment of legislation which created the Office of Economic Opportunity, which we'll hear about a little later on. And the Civil Rights Act, passed in 1964, in July of 1964, major piece of legislation outlawing all forms of discrimination against African Americans, women, minorities of all kinds. In voter registration requirements, they ended racial segregation in schools. This is major, major stuff. But the passage of legislation and how that actually played out in the real world was a little different. And that led to the Jersey City riots of 1964. So for 2 days in Jersey City, the populace exploded. And what happened was it was precipitated. There was actually, if you take Montgomery down to the I-78 and go right, there's a big housing project there. And in 1964, that was called Lafayette Gardens. And it was bad, garbage in the streets, no police presence, and then when the police did come in, there was like police brutality. What precipitated the Jersey City riots was this lady, her name was Mrs. Dolores Shannon. She was drunk and having a fight with somebody in Lafayette Gardens. And the police came and tried to break it up. And this other guy thought he saw one of the police officers hit Mrs. Shannon in the back of the neck. And he started to interfere. His name was Arthur Mays. And he was arrested. Rumors started to fly that a lady was hit with a blackjack. The police, tried to get out of there with these two people into the precinct building, and a whole crowd started following, and it just broke loose. And a lot of pent-up frustration, and throughout the day and night, people were being arrested, people were being, hospitalized. This lady had a delicatessen that was looted, and the person on the right was just some hooligan who was arrested and being hauled off. So about 45 people were hurt, and over 30 people were arrested. And what was really interesting is after the fact, groups of people were brought together and tried to debrief on what happened here. And these were some of the sentiments that were expressed. One lady said, "I know we're mad deep down, so the blood is boiling in our veins." Another person said, "These are the kids who make for riots. They're frustrated and angry and vicious, and they don't take anything from anybody, be they cops or Negro leaders." And a third person said, "We're dealing with an irresponsible element, an element that in the last 5 years, Negro leaders have been unable to reach. These people have grown up out of schools, out of homes, out of work. They have grown up in an aura of lawlessness. They are chronic troublemakers. They are the products of ghettos, residential restrictions, and segregated houses. These kids are bitter." And soon, this was like a precursor. There were two other ones, one in Rochester, New York, and one somewhere a little closer. And then all hell broke loose around the country. In Watts in 1965, there was a big riot, and then from there, Newark had one in 1967, a major, major problem. And the country, the government put out, had a commission. They filed a report called the Kerner Report, and suggested that the causes of this urban violence were white racism, and they called for government programs to create jobs, construct new housing, and put a stop to segregation of African Americans in the ghettos. So that's sort of the birth pains of the Black Panthers. They were founded in 1966, just a brief 2 years after Jersey City riot. And they initially called for a 10-point program. And some of those things, and they called it What We Want, What We Believe. You'll see that up there. And this is the 1972 version, which they expanded a little bit and changed. If you compare this version to the early one, there's a little less violent rhetoric. But some of them were, we want freedom, we want full employment for our people, we want an education for our people that exposes the true nature of this decadent American society. We want an immediate end to police brutality and murder of black people. And we want land, bread, housing, education, clothing, justice, and peace. All very straightforward stuff, which everyone I think would agree with. But what they said is that this isn't going to happen unless we do it ourselves, and because of the police brutality we're facing, we're going to do it being armed. And they would walk around with loaded shotguns, which they actually walked into the capital of Oakland, California, while the legislatures were in business with guns to prove a legal point that you could do this as long as the gun, it was an obscure law, as long as the guns were fully visible, you could do that. So they were pressing the envelope. But you can also see, if you bothered to take the time to read some of this, is that they really expand each of these things, and the rhetoric reflects the sentiments that the people who started the Jersey City riots were feeling. A lot of frustration, a lot of bitterness with the American dream. So, the Black Panther Party was formed in 1966 in Jersey City. By 1968, August 15th, they formed a chapter here in Jersey City. It was the fourth one in New Jersey. David Bell, who was a spokesperson for a center called the Stand Center, which was another community outreach program, announced this, and they met in the building, which was at 384 Pacific Avenue, which is where this house stands. I don't think that's the original building, but that's where they met, and three other people besides David Bell were listed as founding members. One is Isaiah Rowley, who is a main character in this story. Louis Mays and Dwight Reyes were two others. Now, I mentioned Robert Castle, and there was a long time association between progressive religious leaders here in town and the Black Panthers. Robert Castle actually invited the Black Panthers to come and meet at St. John's Episcopal Church for a time when they were in between buildings. And they participated a lot in rallies, and Robert Castle would support these men when later trouble ensued, which is our next chapter. Oh, actually,
Brian, was Louis Mays, you said?
Was it Louis Mays?
Was he the guy that
Louis Mays, yeah.
that saw the woman get hit?
No, Arthur Mays was the guy saw get hit with gun. Yeah. Now, the trouble began very quickly after the Panther chapter was formed. And on November 27th, 1968, 7 Black Panthers were in a car that the police noticed was stolen, and they were pulled over and arrested, and a .32 caliber pistol was found in the car. So they hauled all these people to jail. And there was a big splash in the newspaper, Black Panthers arrested. 3 days later, at 11 p.m. on November 30th, the 5th Precinct building in Greenville, down the road here, about a mile, was riddled with bullets by a drive-by shooting. The building was hit with at least 24 bullets from a submachine gun, and let's see here, on the left you can see a few bullet holes in the outside of the building, and this officer here was one of the 2 men standing outside on the steps when the drive-by occurred, and he had the nightstick shot out from his hand. No one was hurt, but of course, they complete panic, and on day 1, the police said they have no ideas, no clues. They saw a white car drive by with 3 or 4 men in it. That was the story. The next day, an explosion occurred over at the Black Panther office in New Jersey, in Newark, and it was like an acid-spewing bomb that went off, and
Wow.
Carl Nichols, who was the head of the chapter over there, was injured by this. He came out with a statement saying that it was obviously a retaliation for the machine gunning that happened over the police precinct. So automatically, the rhetoric was extremely high immediately after this. And on December 2nd, which is like the 3rd day afterwards, Mayor Thomas Whalen and Police Chief Stephen Nestor were publicly blaming the Black Panthers. They came out in the press and said it. And the mayor called for a statewide conference to deal with the Black Panthers once and for all. And the Panthers didn't really help themselves because they came out, and Isaiah Rowley, who, I don't know if I have a picture here, I think so. Isaiah Rowley, the man in the middle, came out and said that he made an announcement telling the Black Panthers to take off your uniforms and go underground because anyone in uniform is a target for the pigs. Therefore, on Sunday morning, I ordered all Black Panthers out of uniform and underground. The mayor is not going to scare us with his cowboys. If he thinks they are going to shoot us down, he is crazy. If a Black Panther dies, someone else is going to die, and we mean it. So, not much room for negotiation here with these folks. Now, sort of a sub-chapter in this whole story, and I mentioned earlier the Office of Economic Opportunity that was founded. They funded, that was the government organization, and they funded local programs to help poverty. And one of the programs they funded here in Jersey City was called Project of Anti-Recidivism, which was to help ex-cons come back into normal, integrate into normal life. That was a program going on here. The mayor hated it, wanted it ended from the very beginning. And it turns out Isaiah Rowley, our chief Black Panther, was one of the field workers for PAR. And at the time that the police announced the Black Panthers were blamed for this, he also announced that he wanted to end the PAR program because it was fueling the terrorist Black Panther movement. And he came out with proof that funds from there were being used to basically fund a revolutionary terrorist organization. And the way he said is that the people are fed up with these Black Panther goons and all that they represent. I mean all people, black and white alike, who are sick and tired of the continuing threats against public order. Basically, his charges were that, well, Isaiah Rowley was a Black Panther and he worked for the group, therefore, it's a funding opportunity, and that they had bought walkie-talkies, which one walkie-talkie was found in the possession of a Black Panther person. So, it's kind of iffy, but, that's what the mayor said. So Roy Kennicks, who is the project director for PAR, replied to the mayor's accusation saying, some of the charges are pretty bizarre. We have had problems with Mayor Whalen before. I'm aware that he never wanted this program here and will take any chance he can to try and kill it. And it feels like, as you're reading through the articles, it feels like that's what really is occurring. They blame the police, shooting on the Black Panthers, and then you can close down this program that's associated with the Black Panthers that the mayor never really wanted. So this picture shows the mayor in the middle. Now, on December 5th, which is 6 days after the shooting happened, Isaiah Rowley and 8 others were arrested for the strafing attack. Of the 8 who were arrested, only 3 were Black Panthers. The guy on the left, his name is Victor Perez. He was blamed, he was the actual shooter, is what people were saying. Isaiah Rowley's on the right, and these 3 folks in the middle are showing the display of weapons that they found at Isaiah Rowley's house when they came to arrest him. And the police also reported that plans for acid-spewing bombs were found in Rowley's place, and that the same type of bomb exploded over in the Newark headquarters, thereby linking these things. So day 1, 8 people were arrested. The next day, 5 of those people were left, and only the Black Panthers remained in jail. 5 days later, after they were arrested, the Black Panthers of New Jersey filed a $35 million harassment suit against the city of Jersey City for continuous harassment of the organization, and for framing us for crimes that they know they did not commit. And the Black Panthers said that the strafing of the police building was done by the police in an effort to frame the Black Panthers. So lots of back and forth going on here. So welcome. And we were just getting into the good part where the Greenville police station about a mile down the road was machine gunned in 1968, and in a drive-by shooting, and the police and the mayor came out and said it was the Black Panthers who had a chapter here in Jersey City. So several of the men were arrested, and Now the violence continued. Actually, on January 1st, shortly after midnight, a pipe bomb was thrown at the police station, the same precinct that had been machine gunned a few days before. No one was hurt, but the police immediately came out and said that it looked suspiciously like the Black Panthers. And because of all this rhetoric, another guy over in Newark, Councilman Anthony Imperial, called for action, and he called for a convention of citizen groups from Pennsylvania, Connecticut, New York, North and South Carolina to come and attend, basically a vigilante group. And the only item on the agenda was what must be done to take firm action against the Black Panthers. He had already organized a vigilante police force in Newark called the North Ward First Aid Squad, and at one point he warned that when the Black Panther comes, the White Hunter will be waiting. So it's, on all sides, this has really ratcheted up. And on the government front, the Office of Economic Opportunity reviewed Mayor Whalen's charges that the Project Anti-Recidivism funds were being used to pay for the Black Panther activities, and they decided that there was enough suspicious activity to shut the project down. And Reverend Tenor, who was on the Jersey City Council of Churches, one of the groups that was really actively involved in civil rights work here in Jersey City, stated that this exposes society for the way it is, not really caring about the ex-convict. It is the result of a police detective snooping around Project Anti-Recidivism and trying to find trumped-up charges to support a decision already made. Now, Isaiah Rowley on the right, he's in jail for the alleged shooting, and when the mayor race begins. So the 1969 was election year, and Isaiah Rowley announces that he was going to be a write-in candidate for councilperson at the Bergen-Lafayette ward, and he was running on a succession platform. He wanted Bergen-Lafayette to succeed from Jersey City, and the 10-point Black Panther program. The man on the left is Julian Robinson, and he was a minor official within Jersey City, and he was running for mayor. He was not a Black Panther, he was not associated with the Black Panthers in any way, but just before the election, somebody put out a bunch of literature throughout the city showing him and a Black Panther on a flyer alleging that he was a member. And he brought the case to the Supreme Court in Jersey City, saying that the photograph used had been taken by the police several years before, and he wondered how this got into somebody's political hands and was used. Neither man won their election, and it's a little minor point in the history. Now, while Isaiah Rowley, even though he was like one of the head people of the Jersey City chapter, while he was in jail, they continued. The Black Panthers continued their work. They were doing projects associated with St. Peter's College, and on May 3rd, about 200 St. Peter's College students held a rally for the three men who were being held in jail. And Reverend Robert Castle, who we heard before, he was present, as well as a whole group of Black Panthers in berets and sunglasses. On May 13th, a man named Ralph Cobb, who was from Jersey City, on the right, he was arrested in an alleged attempt to extort $5,000 from Rabbi Joachim Prinz of Newark. And it was speculated that he and this other person kidnapped one of the aides in an effort to get $5,000 from the rabbi. And it didn't work, and they were arrested. On June 6th, Lloyd Tyler, who was a young man, 19-year-old man, was handing out Black Panther literature. And he handed a flyer to a young boy of about 12 years old. The police saw the literature, which was, had probably, like most of the Black Panther newsletters at the time, and death to pigs and rhetoric like that. And the cop took it away from the young boy. Lloyd Tyler saw this, ran up to the cops and said, that's not for you, it's not for pig cops. to have this literature. This is for the other people. And the police went to detain him, and he started to fight, and so he was arrested on disorderly person charges and assault on a police officer. And he's important because the Black Panther Party of New Jersey then took his case and filed for an injunction against the Jersey City Police to have nothing to do with the Black Panthers anymore. They cited that a systematic approach of intimidation and harassment, and for a brief time, the police were not allowed to interfere with the Black Panthers at all. And Lloyd Tyler was named a plaintiff for that. So it was probably about 2 weeks that occurred. There was another hearing, and the judge overturned the injunction. And but it really brought to light that the Black Panthers felt that they were being harassed, continually harassed, I should say. Now, the adventure continues, and the controversy. The Black Panthers' original headquarters was at 384 Pacific Avenue down in the Bergen-Lafayette ward. And on January 20th, 1970, their building was shot at and firebombed. The storefront was only slightly damaged because there were about 8 Black Panthers in the office at the time of the attack, and they quickly put the fire out, and no one was hurt. This is a shot of the interior of the office. And what was interesting is that they immediately put out a newsletter and distributed about the place, and they blamed the Jersey City Police. And the actual full article is a rant against the police, saying that they did it in order to drive them out. 3 days later, their office was bombed again. They had called the police in. They had their own little guard out, and they had it under surveillance. And at the second bombing, the police actually captured a guy who was walking up to the back up to the office, up to the Black Panther office, with a box of 5 firebombs. And it turns out he's a white guy, and so they arrest him and learn about these 2 other people that were involved. They arrest them, and there's actually the guy on the right. Looks like Michael Richards, but he really isn't. Not Kramer. So these are the 3 people that were arrested, and the tall dude is Stanley Cabert, and they belonged to an anti-communist religious sect called the Organization of God's People that was founded over in Union City, and they moved here about 2 months before the attack, and they were against the Black Panthers, and they were kind of stupid, and the whole, they got caught red-handed basically, and they were arrested. But by this time, it had been over a year and a half that the Black Panthers were in Jersey City, and a year and a half of real controversy. So on February 18th, 1970, they announced that they were leaving Jersey City and merging with the Newark chapter. They cited that their membership had dwindled, their recruitment efforts were being hampered by the police, and their just considerable harassment. And they felt that Newark would have a larger, more supportive Black community where they could implement the kind of community programs that they wanted to, education and drug test, drug rehabilitation. So they sort of went underground. There wasn't a whole lot of activity going on with them, but the trial of Isaiah Rowley, Charles Hicks, and Victor Perez was still pending. So eventually, on March 2nd, 1970, their trial began for the machine gunning of the police station. They had been in jail over a year.
Wow.
Jury selection took over 2 weeks, and over 200 prospective jurors were thrown out either by the judge, the defense, or the prosecution witness, or the defense attorneys, and an all-white jury was finally selected. I was going to I was going to give you, day by day blow. It was going to be like O.J. Simpson trial, but I decided to spare you, and just give you sort of brief what the case rested on. Now, the prosecution's case rested on the fact that several witnesses claimed they were at Isaiah Rowley's house the day of the attack and heard him plotting it. The police found a 9mm submachine gun at the PATH station in the bus lockers over there, which they had a witness who said through an intermediary he had sold it to Rowley. The two police officers that were outside the building at the time of the shooting said they saw the occupants of the car and recognized them.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. One police officer testified that a rear tail light was out on the car, and when they found the abandoned one, the rear tail light was out. And that was about it for the prosecution. The defense case rebutted with the fact that multiple witnesses said they were at Rowley's house the night of the shooting. There was a party that early on, then they went to a tavern, and multiple witnesses testified that all three defendants were at the tavern. 3 partial fingerprints which were found in the car didn't match anybody in any of the 3. The gun at the PATH station had no fingerprints at all on it or the case that it was in or on the locker itself. And the person who supposedly sold the machine gun denied ever selling it. And it would have been impossible for the police to identify the people in the car as they were diving out of the way for the bullets. And there was an initial police alarm that went out right after the shooting that identified 4 white men in a pale blue or white car. And a Lehigh Railroad detective who was working at the time heard the report and was on the lookout for the car at the time, and he testified that that's what the report said. So the case went on and on about 2 months, and twice the defense asked for a mistrial because of adverse publicity. And the first of the news stories that they were reacting against was that the Office of Economic Opportunity decided to end a second program that was operating here in Jersey City. It was called the Can Do Project, and it was a $2 million project. And Francis Hayes, who was an assistant corporation counsel, said that the reason for doing this was in retaliation for Jersey City ending the Project Anti-Recidivism program, and it was linked to the Black Panthers. So there's a negative news story in the paper about the Black Panthers, and they felt the jury was going to hear that and associate it with these 2 men, or 3 men, sorry. And the second event was Isaiah Rowley's brother, Irving, was arrested for being a fugitive for some outstanding charges, and that was brought up in the news, and they felt that being related to him would have caused the jury to think badly about them. So on July 11th, 1970, the jury went off to deliberation, and the next day, one of them, Ladislaw Siaston, had heart trouble, and the physicians, her own doctor and the court-appointed physician came in and testified that she could not continue on the jury, and it was declared a mistrial. So, further deliberation would have posed an imminent threat to her life. So the prosecution office had to take some time to figure out, are we going to press for a new trial and go over all this again? And while that was happening, that took about, let's see here, I think 3 months for them to decide. And meanwhile, Isaiah Rowley had been released on bail. That's actually his bail picture. He'd been released a little earlier than the other 2 who had been denied bail for a long time, and then it was set at $30,000 for those 2. They couldn't meet it, of course. And so they're still in jail. And while they're waiting for the prosecution to determine what they're going to do, the Black Panthers, who we thought weren't still operating, 5 young men and women were arrested for marching on a police building chanting, "Kill the pigs. If the people don't, the Panthers will." So there's still some of that going on while this is happening. But on September 19th, 1970, the prosecution declared there would be no new trial. They were going to end it. But all 3 men pled guilty for lesser charges. Isaiah Rowley and Victor Perez were charged with, they pled guilty to possessing explosives, and Charles Hicks to possessing a firearm. And they served, each man served 19 months in jail up to this point. And they were sentenced with time served. So that was basically the end of their trials. Now, without being tried, exactly.
Without being tried.
Yeah.
Awaiting trial.
Yeah, awaiting trial.
All that time.
Yeah. And that led to, I'll talk about that in a minute, but that sort of also helped the decline of the Panther Party, because Isaiah Rowley really was the sort of motivation, the motivational force behind it. And he couldn't do anything. He was stuck in prison most of that time.
That was the whole point.
Yeah, that's how they do it, so by the time the trial was over, the Black Panthers were practically finished. Membership had declined radically, and recruitment was nearly impossible, but they still had a presence at 93 Summit Avenue. This building was used by the Project Anti-Recidivism as a dormitory for the ex-convicts. When they got out of prison, they'd come here, stay for a little while until they had a placement. And I don't really know how they remained there, but they did for years. And in August of 1971, nearly a year after the trial, the landlord was sick of the Black Panthers, the police were sick of the Black Panthers, and the landlord agreed to serve a trespassing complaint against them. So the police came in and tried to serve it on a Thursday. The Black Panthers wouldn't let them in, wouldn't let them in. And this at the time, and I'm sorry I don't have a good photo of it, but all the windows were sandbagged. There was like metal over the doors. This was a fortress. The newspaper accounts all talk about it being a real fortress. There's a tunnel built underneath. They had a machine gun emplacement on this building. And so 3 days later, the police decided to raid it, and they came in with, there were like 300 officers, and they busted in, and they arrested 5 people who were in there. And the 5 were charged with trespassing, violating the state firearms law, and operating a paramilitary organization, which was a new law that had actually been passed in New Jersey. And they confiscated 20 weapons, a large stash of ammunition, Black Panther and communist literature, and thousands of barbiturates. So, a very interesting time. And there's actually a guy who lives next door who has original photos of these places, of this place. There were like big posters here of Chairman Mao and Che Guevara and Malcolm X, and the inside, the basement had a rifle range down in the basement. So, very, very interesting look. So, oh, sorry, I had more photos. That is confiscating of the weapons that they found there. They're cataloging. The police are cataloging. That's the head of the police department, or the head of the detectives, George Whalen. This is sort of the interior. You can really kind of tell, some of the revolutionary posters, and they're going through their file cabinet. And now, the raid effectively ended any Black Panther involvement, but it's not the last word. On May 29th, 1972, Isaiah Rowley was walking down the street and he was shot 4 times by a shotgun, unknown assailant, and he died before being able to describe who his attacker was. And many years later, this is Robert Castle on the left. That's Jonathan Demme, the director, who did Silence of the Lambs. Turns out these 2 are cousins. And they hadn't seen one another in like 40 years. They met at a family reunion. Jonathan became interested and he made a documentary on Robert Castle's life being a civil rights activist. He had a very interesting life. It's called Cousin Bobby. It aired on PBS. And it was dedicated to the Black Panthers of New Jersey and Isaiah Rowley, who made a very big impact on Robert Castle. I had hoped to have a digitized video of what he says about Isaiah, but I couldn't get that together for time. But Isaiah Rowley really was a very dynamic person. He was a real leader in the community. He had a very sketchy past. He was arrested for assault and possessing firearms before he was a Black Panther. But he had gotten out of prison and tried to make a difference. And he was basically emasculated. Now, it's nearly impossible to write a story about the Black Panthers without that's not one-sided, because it's all the language, all the press accounts. It's very incendiary. It's very reactionary. It's nothing's ever written about them saying, "Oh, look at these guys that are handing out free breakfast to children." It's always about some violence that's happening, and part of that is their own fault. They're everything they do. You read the Panther newsletters, and it's most god-awful cartoons being driven about killing pigs. And the police are, they got a little pig dressed up in a cop hat being shot and axed and stepped on. So, and there isn't really a legacy of the Black Panther here in Jersey City. Nobody really remembers them. And I think part of it was that they were silenced. Isaiah Rowley never had a chance to implement some of the programs that he wanted to. And this is the kind of thing they wanted to do. They wanted to highlight this is actual New Jersey Jersey City Black Panther literature that was showing this awful housing conditions down in the Bergen Lafayette Ward. And they were pointing out that these are rat holes in this floors of these places. So they were trying to get the landlords to take care of that stuff. Now the police and eventually the FBI hated the Black Panther Party. In 1976, the FBI files were opened, and there were actually two plans for the Jersey City Black Panthers that the FBI tried to initiate. One was to lace food that they were collecting with laxatives. And the second was there was another revolutionary kind of group called the Students for Democratic Society, the SDS, and the Black Panthers and the SDS really kind of worked together at the beginning, and the FBI specifically started a letter writing campaign where they would impersonate one group and set them against each other. Wow. So that all came out in 1976. And this guy's name is Rich Glover. He was an All-American middle guard from Nebraska, and he grew up here in Jackson Avenue. And when he was asked about it, he said, "Well, it's a lot of the storefronts are empty, the buildings are decaying," and he said, "The reason for it is that the Black Panthers scared them away. It used to be nice there, but it's getting bad now." And that's the legacy of the Black Panthers in New Jersey. I think, and just to end with, these are actually